Wow, the room filled up very nicely. I think perhaps word has got out how good the craft talk was on Tuesday. It's really wonderful. So you're in for a treat tonight. We're so lucky this week to have poet, translator, essayist, and wonderful human being, Donald Revell, with us. But before I proceed with Donald's introduction, I want to thank Peter Trias, without whom none of our Trias events this year or ever would have happened. Trias was a Hobart student years ago who cared enough about his school, really about you, who saw himself in you, to endow a residency and reading series so that you could get access to some of the very best creative writers in the country and in the world. And some of you have been meeting with Dawn to talk one-on-one about your poems this week. You can thank Peter Trias for that. Many of you have taken the Trias workshops in the past and have attended our excellent readings. You can thank Peter Trias for that. I want quickly to announce what you'll all get an email about later, which is the good news that next year's Fall Trias Writer in Residence will be the wonderful poet, essayist, and hybrid forms artist Mary Ruefel. And if you'd like a chance to take the Trias writing workshop with her fall semester, she's teaching just one class and 15 people, right? And you have a chance to be in it. So send me a sample of your best creative writing in any genre by 2 days before registration starts, so I can get word out before registration actually starts. But it will be a rolling admission, so the sooner you send it in, the better chance you'll have of getting into the class. I'm Catherine Coles. I'm the director of Trias, and you can find my email address in the English department website. So this is open to people who haven't taken the intro creative writing class. We're just going to choose the best creative writing samples and put those people into the class. So try for it. If you're interested, try for it. It's a wonderful experience. Talk to people who've taken these classes before. Okay. Also, don't forget one last Trias reading this semester on April 2nd. Same time, same place, Nigerian-American novelist and short story writer Nnedi Okorafor. She's a kind of magical realist who roots her sense of myth in the continent of Africa. She writes really interesting, really wonderful stuff, and you should definitely come out for that. You'll get an email about that. And I need to thank the Provost's office for their constant help and support of Trias, and also the English department, Spanish and Hispanic studies, French and Francophone studies, and Africana studies, all of which have been particularly involved in and supportive of Trias this year, and writing and rhetoric. I need to mention as well. And Brian, who's always selling our books and always here kind of giving you the opportunity after you hear someone to buy their work, which you absolutely should do today, and Sue Gage, who is the secret hero of the whole shebang. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you for coming. I know that spring break probably started for some of you a couple of hours ago, and I'm really, really glad that you chose as your first spring break event to come to a poetry reading. Thank you. So back to the introduction at hand. Here's the part that you can find on Wikipedia, but it's kind of necessary. Okay, Donald Revell is the author of more than a dozen poetry collections, including Pennyweight Windows, New and Selected Poems, and most recently, Tantivy, with another collection coming out in the fall. 3 essay collections, one coming out in 2 weeks that just got a really lovely starred recommendation in Publishers Weekly, if you're up on reading that. Numerous award-winning translations from the French of Apollinaire, Rimbaud, Verlaine, and Lefort. He's won the National Poetry Series Prize, the Lenore Marshall Award, the Penn Center USA Award in Poetry, the Gertrude Stein Award, an NEA Translation Award, and a Guggenheim, many other awards. He directs the top-notch creative writing MFA and PhD program at UNLV, and he's among the poets who are most beloved and admired in my generation of writers. I've described Don before as a tent preacher for poetry, and all I can say is watch out, or you might leave here believing in it. So what I'm supposed to say in this kind of an introductory circumstance is this writer's great for these reasons. And you should listen to this writer instead of being on your phone, which, by the way, please turn off. Sometimes there's an element of joking self-deprecation and humility. I'm not nearly so great as this person because of these funny personal anecdotes that demonstrate my charming smallness in comparison to this person's substantial greatness. This is what I'm supposed to say and what the genre of introduction dictates. What I want to say, though, is that a poet's poetic father is unspeakably, unsayably, profoundly unintroducible. I cannot reduce Donald Revell's work to a clever sum up for you. It's too important to me. It's too big, too influential, too moving. What I can do is try to bear witness as to why. Don's poems Each individual one of them, to me, often feels seminal, even when I read them for the first time. Like they're saying a thing I've been waiting my whole life to read. And so this, the moment of me, Catherine Coles, reading the poem, this is the turning point of my whole life. This is when everything changes. This is the hinge. That's a serious kind of present tense feeling that you may be lucky enough to catch hold of tonight. Another reason Dawn's work is not sum-upable to me, is not catchable in an introduction, can be evidenced by his use of metaphors. Metaphors are mystical to begin with. They take two things that we previously assumed were not the same things and put an equal sign between them. And so my love is like a red, red rose is a completely different proposition from my love is a red, red rose. Metaphors make a proposal of belief, of faith, and in Dawn's poem, the is, the equal sign between the two parts, is not figurative but literal, transformative, transubstantiative, if that's a word, which I don't think it is, but now it's a word, transubstantiative. Dawn's metaphors won't sit still in mathematical symmetry. They have to move around, they have to be alive, like all the stuff crammed into Achilles' shield. You find a metaphor in one of Dawn's poems and suddenly others start flying out of it like angels. You can't stop them. All you can do is feel your way through them and believe in them. Like the ending of the poem Zion from the book Pennyweight Windows. I'm saying that death is a little girl. The apple there in her hand is God Almighty, where the skin breaks to her teeth and spills my freedom all over, sunlight turning dead wood coppery rose. Or from Tithon, in the most recent book, Cantibi. The dome of heaven is a nest. It trembles and the nestlings fall into this world, their mouths agape, their mothers already gone to God, yet something is at death, comes to gather them, mends them, and they arise, singing their one note, the green sound shaped by the updraft. Or even the opening line from Victorian's 10, also in Cantibi, the sun is a forerunner of itself. One of the prime characteristics of poetry, in my mind, is that it's unparaphrasable, and Donald Revell's poetry is, in this sense, quintessential poetry, unsummable. It means exactly what it says, and what it says you can't pin to cardboard like a dead butterfly because it's still alive, still moving. All you can do is point and be moved. And if you're lucky, you, like me, will find it to be a hinge leading to the whole rest of your life. It is such a treat and an honor to introduce to you my teacher, my poetic father, my dear friend, Donald Revell.
Thank you. Thank you. Before I begin, I have to remember something that is more important than anything I'll say subsequently, is to congratulate you on having Catherine Coles and Jeffrey Babbitt in your community. I've been teaching poet scholars for 35 years, and the ones I haven't taught are just not worth mentioning. But among the ones I have taught, the very best are Catherine and Jeffrey. They're better than me, and the years to come will show as much. So, congratulations on your remarkable luck, and enjoy it. For heaven's sake, enjoy it. Today is my youngest daughter's 11th birthday. So I'm going to begin with a poem for her, Lucy. I still have to do the party on Saturday, so I didn't get out of that. I still have to hold the piñata while they hit me in the head. But this is for Lucy. That would be bread. That would be a table. This is death, but it moves only one way. And so the bread escapes, and the table along with it, easily as water spilling from a cup all over the ground. Now that I come to it, why agree to it? Every quarter of the wind is bread. Every blade of grass is a table. We're walking beside deer through a halo. So that's for Lucy. She's eating pretty good right now, so no fears. No fears at all. Birds small enough. Birds small enough to nest in our young cypress are physicians to us. They burst from the tree exactly where the mind ends, and the eye sees another world, the equal of this one, though only a small boy, naked in the sun. Glad day I was born, sparrow-hatted old New York, and the physician who brought me drowned under sail next day in a calm sea. There are birds small enough to live forever, where the mind ends, where my love and I once planted a cypress, which is God to us. I gather from my parents' stories that I was a very difficult birth, not meant to live, but a sort of heroic doctor whose name really was Dr. Comfort delivered me successfully, and then the next day really did drown in a sailing accident in Long Island Sound. So you could say that the day after I was born, Comfort died. and it may explain the ebullient and effervescent tone of so many of these poems, I'm not sure. But Comfort was not really anyone I expected to return, so I was pretty much on my own. Okay, when you were a kid, I hope, but I don't really expect, that you played a game with buttercups, you know those flowers, buttercups? You would stick them under people's chins, and if there was a little yellow circle, that meant that they loved you or you loved them or something. So this comes from that. And my graduate students over the years, and now my children, like to make fun of me because they describe all my poems as Jesus, Jesus, birdie, birdie, Jesus, birdie, Jesus. And when my youngest daughter was very small, we were on an elevator once at a poetry conference with lots of famous, well-paid people. And she looked up at a couple of them and said, Jesus is my daddy's girlfriend. Which I was impressed, and they got off at the next floor. But there you go. We're just dating though, there's no commitment. This is called Lay of Waters. Once, Christ, like a girl, held a buttercup under my chin. Love fails. A flower cuts my throat, and angels weep from the womb. Little angels. Love never fails. I met a woman in Kentucky. There's no going back. If I am in a woodland, she is the woodland. The warm, soft hand extended on the leaves. A rill, a creek, a brook. Whatever it is, we come to it in the catastrophe of little angels. Leaves fall. They catch fire, beautiful fire, and never reach the ground. Love fails and never fails. Christ couldn't bear it, but we must. We must walk on water, and through a woodland too. The actual past weeps from future wounds. We have children, and the children live on air. There's a playground that I've I wanted to say centuries, but I should say decades. Over the decades, taken various of my offspring to play on these swings. And over the years, the swings have started to creak more and more. And I began to notice the fact that when the kids are on the swings, it begins to sound like elephants. And so, okay, so we're going to ride the elephant. But of course, in Las Vegas, that's actually not entirely out of the question. One of the houses we almost bought, we were looking around and we heard a very weird noise. And we said, well, what's that noise? And the realtor said, tigers. And I said, please explain. The illusionist, we don't say magician in Las Vegas, that's not nice. The illusionist next door had tigers. And you really don't want to live next door to tigers. I can maybe save you some trouble and money. So it wasn't a complete waste of your time tonight, but because tigers make noise all night long. They're not sound sleepers. So anyway, how did we get there from here? But we'll read this poem now. It will all be explained by the end of the poem. I'm certain of that. Oh, the only thing you need to know about this poem, besides that it's absolutely wonderful, is about my Buddha. I have a Buddha, but I don't know where to put him. And so for almost 20 years now, I put him in the wheelbarrow and see if he'd be happier over here. So I just move him around our place and say, well, maybe you like eucalyptus trees, or maybe you like Palo Verde trees, or maybe you're tired of rabbits. So that I have this poor itinerant homeless Buddha that mostly lives in a wheelbarrow. But isn't that what he wanted after all anyway? Can't stand it is the name. I hear the elephant music of the playground's rusted swings, and up, up, higher than down again. Happy children take the sound. No snakes can read. Walking across the ocean, walking on flowers, nowhere to be seen, I walk on gold. So says hummingbird. So said the fountain as it filled with sand one day when I wasn't looking and my son grew old. Music dies with the man. It dies surely like a finger. We have no poetry by William Blake. Not a single note of Bach survives. Stop kidding yourself. Time is no river. It's a shard of glass, cutting. My Buddha, in the wheelbarrow, holds up a broken bottle while he's wheeled away. A diamond is a diamond. A cloud is a cloud that looks like one. In the afterlife, I take my children to a playground. Enormous birds perch safely on nothing. The swings make no sound. Those of you who were at the little chat we had the other day will know that I'm endlessly interested in the creation of the universe, and what in the world God was thinking of. Had he nothing else to do that day? And the extravagance of it, the absolute, it's not economical creating the universe. It's not green. It would be banned. The EPA would shut God down. He said, look, I've got this planet. Look at the waste of energy. And all these planets with nothing on it, stars shining on nothing. This is just, he would be fine. So, being a liberal, well-educated, elderly person, I've decided to be against the creation of the universe. Except that it's the only poem I know, so it's a conflicted position. So anyway, this poem is called Against Creation. Sovereign of my heart, your temple is deep in the dead branches, moving only when the wind delves so far. Eden is a go. All's terror now. Sovereign of my heart, I am shouting at nightfall. Bats above me, hummingbirds skittish below the bats, almost like dragonflies. I am shouting into debris, immodest happiness in Eden's humility. A go. Adam's fall invented the future. He tied the bat's wings onto dragonflies. Nature, even as it dies, abhors imagination. What men call extinction, I call home. There's a very easy way to tell time in the desert, is that first there are hummingbirds, and then towards evening the hummingbirds are replaced by dragonflies, and then when the sun goes down the dragonflies are replaced by bats. And it's a sort of marvelous sort of, all I have to do is spend decades sitting on the porch watching whatever the hell it is flying over the pool at any given moment. Oh, this is a cheerful one. This is called Death. But it's sort of like your birth certificate is, a death warrant. It said, you have been sentenced to death. Congratulations, young man. Date to be named later. And you live through your various days of execution. You get a BA, an MA, a PhD, tenure, cancer. And it's all part of the product. It's all in the sort of complimentary gift bag they give you, what the Dr. Comfort gave me as he made his way to his sailboat. So this poem is called Death, which is quite cheerful because you do have to make friends with your death, since you're boon companions, your fellow travelers. You've been taking this trip a long time together. So it's actually, to me, it's terribly cheerful and affectionate number. Death calls my dog by the wrong name. A little man, when I was small, Death grew beside me, always taller, but always confused, as I have almost never been. Confusion, like the heart, gets left behind early by a boy, abandoned the very moment futurity, with her bare arms comes a waltzing down the fire escapes to take his hand. Death, I said, if your eyes were green, I would eat them. For what are days but the furnace of an eye? If I could strip a sunflower bare to its bare soul, I would rebuild it. Green inside of green, ringed round by green. There'd be nothing but new flowers anymore. Absolute Christmas. Death, I said. I know someone, a woman, who sank her teeth into the moon. For what are space and time but the inventions of sorrowing men? The soul goes faster than light, Eating the moon alive, it leaves space and time behind. The soul is forgiveness, because it knows forgiveness, and the knowledge is whirligig. Whirligig taught me to live outwardly. Shoe shop, pizza parlor, surgical appliances, all left behind me with the hooey. My soul is my home, an old star, hounded by old starlight. Death, I ask you, whose only story is the end of the story, right from the start, how is it I remember everything that never happened, and almost nothing that did? Was I ever born? I think of the suicides, all of them thriving, many of them painting beautiful pictures. I think of boys and girls murdered in their first beauty, now with children of their own. And I have a church in my mind, set cruelly ablaze, and then the explosion of happy souls into the greeny, frozen Christmas Eve air. Another good Christmas, white choir. Beside each other still, my death and I are a magical hermit. Dear mother, I miss you. Dear reader, your eyes are now green. Green as they used to be before I was born. I've had the wonderful experience being here for a few days of being reminded of what mud is. The desert is not really famous for its mud. We only have desiccation and floods. Those are our only two options. We don't have that interval called mud. And there's a word that is associated with mud, which maybe you don't use on a daily basis, which is a really cool word. And sometimes you make a poem simply because you want to use that word. And the word is in this poem. It's called sex pool, which I know sounds like an internet gaming thing, but it is a very old English word. And what it is if you leave a footprint in the mud, and that footprint fills with water, this even counts if you're a cow or a sheep. So, so anything with feet works. And it fills with water. That is a sex pool. That's the sort of rural, sort of northern English description of what that is. And once you find that out, you have to write a poem. And being a law-abiding citizen of lawless Nevada, I did. It's called Last Man. The hawthorn is God's hat, and patterns in the marble swarm like bees. The world, as I knew it would, saunters out of the sex pool and lilacs, begins to walk away. Little clodhopper, crabapple numb with cold, go quickly and take the buttercup. Keep pace with the sweet earth I cannot keep. I did not think the end would fall in the middle way, but I'm happy now, that now is the hour even burrowing animals become creatures of the air. So I got to make sex schools work. I think. I will never see Mexico. I'm staying with you. The planet's warmer today. And when I look away, the hairs, the empty galaxy of his good eye overflows with talons. See me. I am one more flower. Mexico is barely an hour south by airplane. I'll stay. How would you ever breathe your last breath without these little wings of our death? All the most important experiences of your life will go unnoticed at the time. And then sometime, when you're waiting for some ghastly medical procedure, will suddenly dawn on you that that was the moment that your whole life changed forever and you totally missed it. And that's why you're here now with these technicians, as they call themselves. For me, it was on Route 81, which, as you know, does go through Syracuse. But happily goes through Syracuse. That's the way you deal with Syracuse, you go through. And eventually you're in Pennsylvania, and eventually I was in Pennsylvania, because I went to college in Binghamton, and I saw a house and some trees. And I said, oh, my life would have been very good if I lived there. And I'm sure it would have been. She turned the wheel. Immediately I was in the picture, coming home to the angular house, to green boughs looming tenderly and massive. Tenderness has mass, and Cezanne knew it. Substance of a moment makes for substance. Whatever lives at all lives a long time. She turned again. The road shone bright, wide open, all the way we never went. Something was squandered, as with the eternal life and the love of God. What makes actual human happiness nearly unbearable is its reality, its mass. It's okay to live. You can bear being alive as long as you're deeply convinced there really is no such thing as happiness. So you're not really as pathetic and failed as people tell you. But then at some point, it dawns on you, no, happiness is real. And you're not happy. Go from there. And it leads to all sorts of spiritual conclusions. Or habits, or addictions, or tenure. All of the above. I've been addicted to tenure for years now. I can't get that monkey off my back. And a good thing too. Oh, water. That's really water. Love it. This last poem is long, but it's the last one, so it's consolation. And I'm really fond of it, so I don't feel bad at all. It's called Long-Legged Bird. And it would be, Jesus, yeah, that works. Colorado's good, you should go there. Jesus again. Yeah, you'll get it. It's worth it. I love this one. Thank you so much for coming out. I know you're eager to get down to Fort Lauderdale or New Orleans or wherever you're headed. Des Moines. The margaritas in Des Moines are not to be missed. But thank you very much. Thanks for coming. This is called Long-Legged Bird. I have a sweet house, halfway to the top of fires no one knows. A moth knows. Fire is a door, a sudden portal. He flies in, and what remains behind to burn is not moth, merely discernment. Ophelia said as much to Hamlet, who never knew. Death is an element like water, like fire, and there are many of them, all doors. Drowning, we are done with wisdom, which is carried out to sea. Burning, relieve old minds gone up in smoke. In a sweet house halfway to extinction, the air, let me try to explain. The air is made of souls of men and women, all dancing. There's nothing to see. Acumen and discernment, as much as wisdom and wax wings, are no help. You must breathe the dead to feel the dancing. Despair is the baseline, earth and straw. Everything else, when you breathe it, is ecstasy. I want to explain. Tremolos and squealings and then high sound sweeten the little halfway house forever. I mean, it just goes on forever. As through the little portals children pour, I keep a fiddle in my bones. At night sometimes the vibration of deep strings becomes a trembling. I wake up, frightened at first, seeing the shiny cadres of my dreams dispersed into dark corners and thin air. Then, gradually, the fear subsides. I am only the music that I am, and always it leaves me ordinary ecstasy, awaking from silly dooms of inwardness. Watch a butterfly alighted on an iris. When it flies away, it bursts the flower, projecting its colors and infant textures upward and out until the horizon itself is one pure flower flying home. Loving the fire, moth feels nothing to forgive. Lifted out of the water by 1,000 strengths of flowers, Ophelia lives. Forgiveness is a watercourse in conflagration all around the world, a great adventure. When I walk on ground, I walk on my bones, making music, rather feeling the music making me. Out of thin air into pure air, horizon calls me. I am attending to 10 accidents. I am searching through the colors. I am going home to Colorado with bombs. I am bringing a plum tree and a cherry tree for a new town. When the avalanches come and gone, I will put them in the ground. I expect there to be dancing. I expect there to be forgiveness on the epic scale. I have wasted the effort of all flowers because I expect there to be forgiveness on the epic scale. I keep a little man inside my bones. His fiddling makes my Chinese daughter smile. When did our sweet Jesus become the purview and bad pretext of jailers? How did loving kindness come to devastate the world with wars? Overhead, a long-legged bird circles my sweet house. I feel he is waiting for me to join him, to find real wings and rise out of my own mind into his air. What would I find there? Portals and invisible heavy traffic. My mother as a baby, my father a cowboy, my sister, finally, after so much heartbreak, a girl. The body travels inside the soul. The body's a passenger. This has nothing to do with Jesus, though he is right here beside me. He is unhurt. Overhead, the long-legged bird departs at last. I'm staying. My soul was kind enough to put me here, halfway to extinction with good wine and a fine little house. So here I stay. Bones of mine, play no mournful melodies. There's no harm in all the world, little man. There is only happiness on a lofty slope where it still snows. I am grieving with my dead. I feel them dancing. Thank you.
Minutes for Q&A if you would like to ask questions.
How do you keep a longer poem together? At what point do you have to stop and kind of reassess?
A, don't stop. B, don't reassess. It's all nerve. You know, you just, it's, things don't connect, they combine. And it's just, I'm not done. More coffee, smoke a little bit, more coffee, take a walk, smoke a little bit, right? And it just goes that way. And I get a bit nuts when I do long poems because there has to be a piece, it doesn't matter what the music is. It can be John Coltrane, it can be Led Zeppelin, there's some things obviously it can't be. Anything after Woodstock, it can't be that. Because I don't remember anything afterwards. 3 days and but you just go, you just keep going, and it's amazing how, if you don't have a plan, the poem's plan becomes clear to you. Because having a plan really gets into the way of what the poem wants to do. Because I think the poem is this really upset little guy on the desk saying, "Look at me, goddammit!" And it's okay. And I just go, I just follow it. But every time I've decided to have some beautiful architectural structure, or I'm going to base this on the late string quartets of Bartok or something, it all falls to hell. But if I just go with it and listen until you just exhausted and done. So long poems are just very long, short poems. For me, I know that there are marvelous things. I mean, I've heard great things about the Aeneid. Not this big, But it's just really paying attention to the poem and where it wants to go. And say, I'm not done. Keep going.
So if your process is down with work until you're finished, how much of it is rewriting later on? How much is returning to the old poems? Do you let them sit and come back to them?
I try never to rewrite anything. But I have a sort of critical mass because I fill my pants with pieces of paper with little things on them. And eventually my pants tell me that they're full. It sounds sort of like a preschool incident. But I just know that there's a poem that I better write now because otherwise I'll need new pants. And I just put all these bits of paper on my table and start trying to see which ones like fall in love with each other, which ones match up. And it really is, it becomes that kind of, like I'm almost a spectator as they find one another and enter into a relation. And because of course there is a relationship, I wouldn't have written those things down over that particular period of days if there wasn't a connection. So I really don't have to make a connection. It's already there, I just have to let it become, in that sort of wonderful American sense, self-evident. I mean, I love that phrase. We hold these truths to be self-evident. I mean, that could replace half of the MFA programs. just write that on the blackboard and they can go home now. Thank you very much. But I hold those truths to be self-evident. But I wouldn't have written that down. It wouldn't have mattered to me. Because, your head, all sorts of things go through your head all the time. But you wrote those ones down. And there must have been a reason. So there is a reason. You don't have to come up with one. And just sort of let them find one another rather than impose it. And so I don't even know if I could call it a process. It's just a sense of it's time. Kind of like when my wife was ready to have the baby. It's time. You know? And it just, and of course sometimes it doesn't work out. And so like the world is not saying, Donald didn't finish his poem today, mass suicides in Kyoto. You know, no, people manage to go along anyway. But when it works out. And you begin over the years to have a kind of faith that you trusted, that I wouldn't have written it down if it didn't matter somehow to me. I don't know if it'll matter to anyone else at all, but that's how it happens. Yeah, Melissa.
This is a question from a student, and she asked me if I would ask you, and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it, but basically goes like this. When we were reading your poems in class and talking about them, we all found ourselves having to kind of touch the evil eye and cross our fingers and board things off, because there's a lot of pretty audacious, what appeared to us to be blasphemy, of the things that even the non-religious of us felt like we had to be careful intoning out loud. And I think that the question that follows that observation is something along the lines of, like, how do you dare?
Jesus is my girlfriend.
I'm a Jew.
I bought the corsage, I have certain rights. I'm one of those oddballs who continues to suspect that God is alive, which means that anything goes. You know, that God is at least as free to change his, her, their mind as I am. And so I took God to the prom. You know, they took me, and it's an ongoing thing. I mean, and I take this, I mean, to be entirely serious, I take such permission from people like William Blake, Jane Lead, Dame Julie Marriage, that God really didn't, like, you know, send a candygram and then go to Florida. that in fact, the business of creation is still very much underway, and obviously it is now my business too, and yours. And so I don't see it as blasphemous at all. I mean, I'm kind of a fanatic. You know, I really miss, you know, going out on Friday, making a pile of wood, and, you know, throwing another heretic on the fire. You know, it doesn't bother me. I love that Cromwell's cannons had written on them, God is love. Just in case they forgot in Ireland. Fire in! God is love! So the fundamental is that God is alive. And that it's not, creation isn't done. And so I don't think of it as blasphemy. Blasphemy depends upon looking backwards. Like and God isn't behind you. God's in front of you. And so whatever I say that looks over my shoulder, I can't insult because nobody's there. There's literally nobody behind you. And I'm at the back of the bus, and God's driving, so it's okay. So I really don't feel it. I mean, I was educated by nuns. So I know what it's like to get a prayer book in the back of the head. And I would never say anything that would upset them for fear of my life.
Back then.
Back then. But so yes, I take it very seriously. I don't think of myself as impious or blaspheming, but I think of myself as, I know that my Redeemer liveth. And I'm not kidding. So that's that. If that helps,
The house that you passed from Binghamton to Pennsylvania, that changed your life?
Mm-hmm.
What was the color of the front door?
It was actually a very dark red.
Thank you. It was red in my head too.
Yeah. Well, when you spend all those years going down Route 81, because I was going to college in Binghamton and I had a girlfriend in Maryland. So I was always going down Route 81 back and forth. And then sadly I had a good friend, a novelist, I'm sure you know John Gardner, who passed away in a motorcycle accident on 81. So that whole stretch of road from Binghamton to Scranton, Wilkes-Barre, and then down, kind of holy territory. Yeah,
You're a translator also.
that's the room.
Yeah, so I'm interested, when you decide to translate particular folks' work, what draws you to that?
Well, with me, it's very personal. Like it's really hard for me to think of myself as a translator because if like someone came and offered me a lot of money to translate this new book, I couldn't do it. Because for me, these are old relationships. You know, I translate Rimbaud, Verlaine, Apollinaire, but because I've been reading them since I was a teenager, and eventually, I found myself so much in need of their company. I mean, I really needed to spend quality time with them. And the way to do that was translate. And I had some friends in the publishing business and the poetry business saying, Don, you've really got to do this. You've got to do so, for example. And I said, okay, I will. But only because I've been reading the poem, you know, for years and years and years and years. So I can't really propose myself as a translator because I couldn't take a job on. And I don't know if I'll ever translate again because I've translated my buddies, my traveling, you know, partners. And to me, translation is very intimate. It's the product of a very long-standing intimacy. So like, my Rimbaud is my Rimbaud. I know him. You know, I know what he would do in a certain situation in a restaurant. You know, and that's what I try, and that's what I think is the value. Because happily, the French remains the French. I can never ruin that. And so the translations become the evidence of an intimacy. And that's what I love about the translations by other people that I love. They're not just skillful or learned, though there's room for that and there's necessity for that. But they're somehow the journal of a love affair and a continuing love affair. And that's all I know how to do. That's what and it's also it's work because it's like finding a lost love. After all these years, Rambo and I are finally taking a vacation. You know, Verlaine and I are getting on that boat, and it's really a little bit gooey because I love him so much. I mean, I loved Apollinaire's whole story. You know, I'm the bastard son of the Pope, born across the street from the casino in Monte Carlo, moved to France. You know, that's the backstory because my family's history, Ancestry.com will never catch us. Because we were, you know, crossing from Alsace to Marseille, Algeria. You know, there's no figuring it out. And I found stories like that. And of course, Rimbaud's mother, don't get over that. If you ever had a French mother, you know that it's a very unique event. Yves Bonfoy writes brilliantly about it. Beautifully. Yves Bonfoy, God bless his name. He's the boss. He's the boss. Yeah. He's the boss of me. I'm sure. That means I can go to supper now? Yay! Thank you.